Distinguished delegates, esteemed faith leaders, colleagues, and friends, it is an honor to address you today on a matter that transcends politics, economics, and even environmental science, a matter that speaks directly to the heart and soul of our collective humanity, the role of religion in environmental governance. We are gathered here at a time of unprecedented planetary crises. Climate change, ecosystem degradation, biodiversity loss, pollution, and even pandemic threats are no longer distant warnings. They are present realities. And while science and policy frameworks offer critical tools, they are not enough. We must reach deeper into the ethical, moral, and spiritual dimensions that guide human behavior. The Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES, has reported that 3/4 of land-based environment and 66% of the marine environment have been altered by human activity. We face the extinction of 1 million species. Air pollution kills millions annually, and climate change left unchecked threatens the very basis of human civilization. This is not merely a scientific or technical issue. It is a moral crisis, one rooted in our relationship with nature and with one another. As UNEP's Faith for Earth's coalition puts it, and has emphasized, unsustainable consumption and production patterns are not only environmental issues, they are deeply ethical ones. But why religion matters? Let us consider some compelling statistics. 84% of the world's population identifies with a religion. Faith-based organizations own 8% of habitable land, run half of the world's schools, and controls substantial financial investments, making them the fourth largest economic power on earth. Religious teachings, whether from Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, or even indigenous traditions, offer rich traditions of environmental stewardship. From the Quranic concept of Khalifa stewardship to the Buddhist interdependence of all life to indigenous cosmologies that see nature as sacred kin, spiritual traditions provide the values and narratives necessary to reframe our relationship with the earth. In addition, we need to consider another power, the power of beyond formal law, the power of moral norms. We must recognize the limits of formal environmental law. Formal governance systems, laws, treaties, regulations are necessary for sure, but not sufficient. This is where the concept of beyond formal law becomes critical. It invites us to include the non-state normative, customary, and faith-driven approaches in shaping environmental behavior. In many communities, especially in the global south, religious authority and customary practices wield more day-to-day influence than formal law. Faith actors reach hearts where laws reach minds. They can shift behavior not through compulsion, but through conviction. Their sermons, schools, rituals, and festivals shape values, aspirations, and everyday decisions, from how we consume to how we conserve. However, we need to be inclusive and move from belief to action for faith-based environmental governance to work. Let me offer a few practical avenues through which religion can support environmental governance. First, greening sacred spaces. Many FBOs have already begun retrofitting temples, mosques, churches, and synagogues with solar panels, sustainable water systems, and green architecture, turning places of worship into models of sustainable living. Second, faith-informed policy advocacy. Faith leaders can influence public discourse and policy. Their moral authority can challenge extractive economies and promote climate justice, especially in defending the rights of the poor, women, youth, and indigenous peoples. Third, ethical investment. Religious financial institutions must lead in divesting from fossil fuel and investing in nature-positive enterprises. The post-COVID recovery is a unique opportunity to reorient towards ethical, planet-friendly economic models, as we have seen in the past few years. Interfaith collaboration, which is supported by Faith for Earth Coalition and other interfaith bodies, and the Our Sacred Commitment Declaration are examples of how faiths can unite to speak with one moral voice across religious lines, contributing to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And fifth, religious education and formation. Embedding ecological values in religious education systems, whether madrasas, seminaries, or Sunday schools, ensures that the next generation grows up seeing care for the earth as a spiritual duty. Therefore, we must move toward a collective environmental ethic, one rooted not in homogenizing belief systems, but in shared moral responsibility. This ethic can, first, reinforce the human rights of the poor and vulnerable, disproportionately affected by environmental degradation. Second, align national development strategies with ecological limits and spiritual values, and guide global institutions, including the UN, to formally recognize the ethical and spiritual dimensions of sustainability. As I mentioned, we have seen during the COVID-19 pandemic, and we understood that we need a systemic thinking and systemic change, where health, nature, equity, and governance are interlinked. The spiritual voices must not be brought to the center of multilateral decisions making only, but also to everyday's life. But to institutionalize the role of religion in environmental governance, I propose the following. First, governments should formally engage religious leaders in environmental policy, consultations, and implementation plans. Second, intergovernmental bodies must adopt frameworks that include ethics and spiritual values in environmental agreements. Third, faith actors must build capacity in environmental science and policy to better inform their advocacy and programs. And fourth, partnerships between scientists and theologians must be deepened to articulate practical, value-based responses to environmental challenges. The Faith for Earth Coalition has played a pivotal role in mobilizing and amplifying the voices of faith leaders at various UN climate change, biodiversity, and land degradation conferences, the known as COPs, recognizing their unique capacity to bridge moral authority, community mobilization, and environmental stewardship. Through the organization of high-level faith leaders summits and establishment of dedicated faith pavilions, beginning with COP26, but continuing until COP29, and expanding the scope and impact in the subsequent COPs, the coalition has brought together hundreds of faith actors from diverse traditions and regions. These inclusive spaces have served not only a platform for interfaith dialogue, but also as forums for advocacy, where spiritual leaders and communities have collectively addressed contemporary environmental challenges rooted in the ethical teachings of their faiths. Discussions have focused on the urgent need for systemic change, raising the climate and environmental crises beyond science and policy to a deeper moral and spiritual crisis, a crisis of ethics, values, and responsibility towards the earth and future generations. By grounding environmental actions in moral imperatives, the coalition have contributed to shaping a moral, holistic narrative for climate justice and sustainable transformation at the heart of global climate negotiations. The earth is not just a resource. It is a sacred trust, amana, a gift, a temple. Protecting it is not just a legal duty. It is a spiritual obligation. As people of faith and conscience, we must act now not only because we can, but because we must. We need to build a new model of environmental governance, one that is inclusive, ethical, and inspired, one that does not simply regulate behavior, but transforms hearts, one where religion does not sit at the margins of environmental discourse, but stands at its moral core. Documents such as Laudato Si by Pope Francis and Al-Mizan, A Covenant for the Earth, represent transformative, systemic-level contributions to environmental governance by grounding ecological responsibility in deeply rooted theological, ethical, and moral frameworks. Laudato Si articulates an integral ecology that connects care for the environment with social justice, economic equity, and spiritual well-being, calling for a cultural revolution that redefines humanity's relationship with nature, rooted in compassion and responsibility. Similarly, Al-Mizan, developed through the leadership of UNEP's Faith for Earth and global Islamic scholars, offers a comprehensive Islamic ecological ethics that highlights balance, Al-Mizan, stewardship, Khalifa, and justice, Adil, as guiding principles for sustainable living. Both texts go beyond symbolic declarations. They institutionalize religious engagement in environmental action, offering faith-consistent policy frameworks, practical guidance, and theological legitimacy for systemic change. By doing so, they help bridge the gap between global environmental governance and the lived beliefs and practices of billions, embedding sustainability within moral and spiritual worldviews and catalyzing faith-based contributions to the national and multilateral environmental strategies. Ladies and gentlemen, to achieve truly sustainable and ethical environmental governance, we must strategically integrate the moral authority, community reach, and value-driven frameworks of religions, transforming faith into a powerful force for environmental action and systemic change. Thank you very much.